I don't say for a moment it would determine an election. Papers ain't that important. But Mr. Blair would hate to go into the next election without the Sun pushing him.
Murdoch also talked about his fears for British football, with the European Commission threatening to bust up Sky's £1 billion deal with the Premier League. He warned of dire consequences if it succeeds.
We take it seriously in that it could break the Premier League. And the tragedy of it was, if they get into this, you're going to see more than half the football clubs in Britain go broke.
And of course, we didn't forget today's big story, his son James's new job.
I could disagree with anyone, and I may well agree as well.
The appointment angered some shareholders, but Murdoch faced them down.
If James does screw up, how difficult will it be for you personally to get rid of him?
Well, of course it'll be on a number of grounds. I won't like hurting him. I won't like the hurt that goes with admitting that we were wrong. But you have to do it.
And it will be done?
Of course.
For Rupert Murdoch and his wife Wendy, it was a good day at the office. Job done, investor revolts crushed. They moved off to fix another part of the empire. Jeff Randall, BBC News.
I'm joined in the studio now by Jeff Randall, but first to our political correspondent, James Landale in Downing Street. James, how's what Mr Murdoch's had to say about Labour gone down there?
Well, tonight Downing Street saying they're relaxed. This is no surprise. They always expected this with the election of new Conservative leader, and they've always disagreed with Rupert Murdoch on Europe, so business as usual. Well, maybe, but this does matter. On one level, this is Rupert Murdoch simply saying, well, I'm going to play hard to get with Labour, don't take me for granted. And to the Tories, he's flirting with them, lifting his skirts a little, saying, look, I couldn't support you under William Hague and Ian Duncan Smith, but with Michael Howard, you look a bit more credible, so I might change tack. But I think it's on Europe that this really matters. Rupert Murdoch is fundamentally opposed to the new European constitution. He thinks it's bad for Britain and it's bad for business. Now, we always know that Rupert Murdoch's first rule of politics is always back the winner. Well, I've been told by somebody very close to him tonight that he's even thinking, he's so concerned about this issue, that he might even back the Tories at the next election, even if he knows they're going to lose, simply because they too oppose this constitution. So Downing Street might be relaxed, but I can tell you this will concentrate minds in Downing Street. They know that newspapers don't win elections, but it doesn't half help to have them on your side. Fiona.
OK, James. And Jeff, big day for Mr Murdoch. We were expecting something of a revolt from his shareholders. We faced them down.
Yeah, we heard all sorts of dire predictions today, Fiona, about shareholder rebellions. Some talked darkly about the nuclear option, by which they meant voting off the entire board, including Mr Murdoch. Well, it just never happened. I think Mr Murdoch went into that meeting today pretty confident. He knew he had the votes in his pocket. Some big shareholders, I think, just chickened out. They didn't want to turn up, they didn't want to make a protest. It was left to small shareholders, ordinary people, to oppose him from the floor, and he was very confident. He said to one, well, if you don't like it, just sell the shares. I think what we saw today was the start of a Murdoch dynasty.
OK, Jeff, thanks very much. And you can see Jeff's interview with Rupert Murdoch in full on Newsnight over on BBC Two after the programme. The Minister for Children has apologised to a victim of sexual abuse for describing him as extremely disturbed. Margaret Hodge made her remarks about Demetrius Panton in a letter to the BBC. But tonight, Mr Panton insisted that Mrs Hodge should resign.
Are you going to apologise, Mrs Hodge?
Not a word last night, but Margaret Hodge has since been forced to back down. Demetrius Panton, abused as a child in a home run by a council that she took charge of in the 80s, had threatened to sue her for describing him as extremely disturbed. In a statement this lunchtime, Mrs Hodge apologised unreservedly, saying, "I am sorry for the distress caused to you in recent days," adding, "I assure you I will not repeat these words again."
If I was extremely disturbed, that still means that I have a legitimate right to speak out about my experiences. And I believe that Mrs Hodge has done the right thing by apologising to me, but I believe she should do the decent thing to the 11 million children out in British society by actually resigning.
The Conservatives have echoed that call, accusing Mrs Hodge of sending a damaging signal.
Child abuse victims have great difficulty in being courageous enough to come forward and talk about their experience. If they fear that once having done so, they'll be branded by the minister responsible as disturbed people, this may mean that further cases of child abuse go undiscovered.
Mrs. Hodge is considering a more public apology, making a donation to a children's charity and paying Mr. Panton's legal costs. But friends say she won't resign.
It's completely the wrong moment to be getting rid of a capable minister who is committed to this task. The interests of children should supersede all people's feelings about this particular sad and sorry episode.
No comment tonight at Mrs. Hodge's home. Mr. Panton has accused her of engaging in the politics of the gutter. But Margaret Hodge has a powerful backer. Tony Blair is fond of her and values her work in this department. Other ministers might not have survived the last few days. It looks as if she might just manage it. Gita Hari, BBC News at the Department for Education and Skills.
One of Britain's biggest ever security operations has been prepared for the state visit of President George Bush next week. 5,000 police officers and 700 of Mr. Bush's own Secret Service agents will protect the president. George Bush has said he wants to meet the families of British soldiers who died in the Iraq War and to tell them that their loved ones died for a noble cause.
President Bush will get to stay at Buckingham Palace next week, but for many people in Britain he is an unwelcome guest. Big demonstrations are planned against him, yet he's putting a brave face on it.
I am so pleased to be going to a country which says that people are allowed to express their mind. That's fantastic. You know, freedom is a beautiful thing. And the fact that people are willing to come out and express themselves says I'm going to a great country.
Mr. Bush says he wants to meet some of the families of British troops who've died in Iraq. But do they want to meet him? Among the Royal Military Police killed near Basra in June was Corporal Russell Aston. His father refuses to see anyone from the American government.
I have nothing to say to them. My son is gone. He went to war on the 14th of February, and I have got to get used to the fact that I will never see him again. And to actually come face to face with the perpetrators of that war would give me a great deal of anger.
But the widow of Sergeant Stephen Roberts does want to see Mr. Bush.
To see someone face to face and look them in the eye will give you a little bit more of an insight. It'll either confirm or dispel, you know, your suspicions about somebody. I think it would just put my mind at rest if I came face to face with him.
The Stop the War coalition want to come face to face with him at a big march through London next Thursday. They've been negotiating a route with the police, but so far there's no agreement.
Our priority is to ensure safety, is to ensure that the President visits in a way that allows his safety. At the same time, we also have a duty to ensure that demonstrators are allowed to actually give their views and voice their thoughts.
Next week's controversial visit here will be a security nightmare, because the police have got to worry not only about big demonstrations, but also about the threat from terrorists. It's why more than 5,000 officers will be deployed in what the Metropolitan Commissioner is calling an unprecedented security operation. Ben Brown, BBC News, Central London.
American forces say they've prevented an attack on a US Army base in northern Iraq. The operation, in which several Iraqis were killed, took place near the northern town of Tikrit. North of Baghdad, 2 American soldiers were killed and 3 others wounded when militants attacked their convoy. And later tonight, another US soldier was killed in another ambush in the Iraqi capital. The jury in the Soham murder trial has heard about Ian Huntley's behaviour on the night Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman disappeared. The court was told that initially Ian Huntley didn't mention having seen the 10-year-old girls, but later told a woman involved in the search for them he'd spotted the girls near his home. Ian Huntley denies murder.
One family who joined the people of Soham in the desperate search for Holly and Jessica. Susan Hurrell in the middle and her 2 daughters were 3 of a series of prosecution witnesses today questioned about that night and their encounters with Ian Huntley. She and others spoke of how everyone combed the town time and again, some including Holly's dad screaming the girls' names in a fruitless attempt to bring them back. Mrs. Hurrell said she met Ian Huntley and he told her that he'd seen 2 girls earlier in the evening. She immediately alerted the police. The officer she spoke to was Sergeant Pauline Nelson, who today told the court she summoned Huntley with the words, "You, here." She said, "I asked him why he hadn't told anybody. He said that he had. He waved his arm at the crowd and said he had told them. I wanted to know if he had told a police officer, and he said he hadn't. Asked why, Huntley said he didn't think it was necessary." Sergeant Nelson was later asked if she'd noticed anything about Huntley. She said he smelt as though he was freshly bathed. He smelt of soap or aftershave. She said the rest of us, including myself, were rather bedraggled and stale. She also said that when Huntley came closer, she felt uncomfortable. Stephen Jarvis and David Hobbs also came across Huntley that night during the search. Mr. Hobbs said that Huntley mentioned seeing the girls earlier that evening. He said, Huntley, said there were 2 girls gone missing. They were both wearing red tops, and one had blonde hair and one had brown hair. But Stephen Coward, Ian Huntley's barrister, questioned that account. Mr. Coward said someone happened to mention that the girls were wearing red Manchester United tops, and that the man you knew as the caretaker said, I saw them passing my house. David Hobbs accepted that, saying yes. On Monday, Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr will return to court to hear more evidence, more witnesses, as the prosecution case develops. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
Still to come on tonight's programme, the FA on the defensive as it admits the England selection saga is unacceptable.
I'm starting to feel uncomfortable about us working in such close proximity every day, and me knowing so little about you seems elitist and wrong.
Why Britain's biggest screenwriter says he's had enough of romantic comedies. It's taken nearly a week, but the Countess of Wessex has finally been reunited with her baby daughter. Prince Edward said it was a great relief and joy that the family were finally back together, and said that mother and daughter were both doing remarkably well. Vicky Young reports.
Prince Edward has had a troubling week. It's understood that both his wife and daughter spent time in intensive care at hospitals 35 miles apart. The Prince said seeing them together had been wonderful.
A great day, great relief and joy today that we've been able to reunite mother and daughter, which is just fantastic. It's been a priority for the last week, and the amazing thing is that our baby girl has recovered well enough that she can come here to join Sophie, which is fantastic.
Sophie Wessex had been enjoying a healthy pregnancy, continuing her charity work until last week. But after an emergency caesarean, her daughter was born prematurely and taken to a specialist baby unit.
She's out of intensive care, but she's premature, so she has to, they have to continue to monitor very carefully. So she will be in for, who knows, it could be weeks.
As for a name for the royal baby, the Prince said it was too early for decisions like that.
We've only just got together, and so, hopefully, we'll, now that as we get to, as certainly as Sophie gets to know her daughter, and, we'll come up with a name, don't worry.
It's clearly been an emotional day here for the royal couple as they enjoyed their first hours together as a family. It's understood there are no plans to move Sophie Wessex or her baby home this weekend, but being reunited with her daughter is sure to lift the Countess's spirits. Vicky Young, BBC News at Frimley Park Hospital.
A 39-year-old man is being questioned by police about the disappearance of Devon teenager Alicia Eborn. The 18-year-old disappeared a week ago from a village near Ivybridge. Police are continuing to search woods and fields across Dartmoor. Hopes for a permanent settlement to 2 decades of civil war in Sri Lanka suffered a new setback tonight after foreign mediators pulled out of the country. Norwegian peace brokers have threatened not to return until a power struggle between Sri Lanka's president and the Prime Minister is resolved. A week ago, the president suspended Parliament and accused the Prime Minister of making too many concessions to the Tamil Tiger rebel movement. For 20 years, they fought a civil war for an independent Tamil state. It cost the lives of over 65,000 people. Both sides signed a ceasefire last year that paved the way for the peace process. Adam Minot reports from Sri Lanka.
Intensified security again. Nervous Sri Lankans hoped these days were behind them. But now some fear the 2-year ceasefire is under threat. Norwegians have been acting as brokers. They now say the peace process is on hold.
Well, we hope for an early resolution, but hoping is all we can do. Norway has been called upon to facilitate the peace process. The peace process is...
The Deputy Foreign Minister, Vidar Helgason, says he can do nothing in the middle of a political crisis, and he's gone home. The crisis started while Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was abroad. He came back to a state of emergency imposed by the president. who thinks the Prime Minister has given away too much in peace talks with the Tamil Tigers. They seek autonomy, but she says they want independence.
The Tigers want peace, but they want peace with a separate state. From their document that they have recently presented, that seems to be fairly evident.
The Civil War saw some of the most vicious, bloody combat of the 20th century. 1 million people displaced, 1,000 killed. 2 decades of warfare left much of northern Sri Lanka in a state of near total destruction. This is the main Tamil city of Jaffna. It was, in effect, a battlefield, and parts of it still lie in ruins. Reconstruction has started, and £3 billion in foreign aid has been promised, contingent on peace. Tamils are heading home as well. Peripunatha Nalatambi fled to the UK and then Canada. He's back, lecturing at Jaffna University. But the past few days have made him jumpy.
People are nervous. Some people said that the war is going to come. Some people expect that the peace will come soon.
Everyone's nervous. Tourists, vital foreign revenue, have made record bookings, but some have now cancelled. Sri Lankans have sampled peace. They don't want their politicians to push them back towards conflict. Adam Minot, BBC News, Colombo.
Hundreds of workers at the Sellafield nuclear reprocessing plant in Cumbria have staged the first in a series of strikes. The industrial action is in protest at different rates of pay at the site. British Nuclear Fuel say safety won't be affected. Football and England's preparations for their friendly against Denmark has been overshadowed by another row between the squad and the Football Association. The FA admits the players are angry over the treatment of Leeds striker Alan Smith. He was called into the squad yesterday, but then sent home again shortly afterwards.
Brought in to reform and modernise the Football Association, known as a disciplinarian. Ex-footballer and new FA Chief Executive Mark Palios probably didn't think it would come to this.
Did you expect the pressure to be quite this bad?
The answer to that, quite honestly, is no, I didn't expect it to be as bad as this. This is a different pressure to that which I've experienced in the past. Having said that, I've taken the job and I must learn to live with it.
But for how much longer? It's just weeks since the England team threatened to strike when Rio Ferdinand was dropped for missing a drugs test. Now Palios faces the wrath of the players again for dropping Leeds player Alan Smith. He was arrested by police yesterday, but not charged after allegations he threw a bottle into the crowd at a football match. When the FA heard about the arrest, they dropped him. The player's agent says Smith is realistic about what happened.
Alan's bitterly disappointed, but he's got to accept that situation. There's nothing more he can physically do about it, so he'll just try and put it back to the back of his mind and get on with it, because frankly there's nothing else he can do.
Even the England coach Sven-Göran Eriksson didn't want Smith sent home. The gulf between the playing staff and Football Association officials is becoming more obvious.
Tonight, the England team are ensconced in the luxury of their 5-star hotel. Their meeting with the chief executive of the FA was difficult and strained. Right now, the players have the upper hand, and Mark Palios is looking increasingly isolated. Sally Nugent, BBC News, Manchester.
Staying with football, and for Scotland and Wales, it's their last chance to join England at next year's European Championships in Portugal. Both countries have first leg playoff matches tomorrow. Scotland take on Holland in Glasgow, with manager Bertie Boats insisting his team will have to play the game of their lives to win. Wales face Russia in Moscow as they attempt to qualify for their first major final since 1958. They're without several key players, but manager Mark Hughes is confident they can cause their opponents plenty of problems. Now, he's currently our most successful screenwriter, responsible for some of Britain's best-loved films, such as 4 Weddings and a Funeral and Notting Hill. This weekend, Richard Curtis hopes to repeat the trick with the opening of his latest film, Love, Actually. But as he told Rosie Millard, it's time for him to move on from romantic comedies.
Right, who do you have to screw around here to get a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit?
Once again, Richard Curtis delivers a familiar formula. Hugh Grant being vaguely rude, bumbling around in tourist book Britain. Yet this time, Love Actually has had a rough Atlantic crossing. One American critic called it an indigestible Christmas pudding. Over tea in Notting Hill, Curtis brushes aside such cavils.
Reviews in America have been,
about half and half, I think. And that's sort of what I expect in life, really. I think if you go out to dinner, about half the people at dinner like you and the other half don't. And you know, that's fair enough, really.
In Britain, the film's gone down well with some critics, but not with others.
I certainly think Richard Curtis has gotten a little bit stale doing the same things over and over again, and you can see them all being trotted out again in Love Actually, which is like a greatest hits film of all his key moments.
But who said greatest hits don't do good business? 4 weddings and a funeral took over $250 million worldwide. Notting Hill made $363 million, and Bridget Jones took $279 million. Curtis has directed as well as written his latest picture, but the man who made white weddings fashionable again and big knickers acceptable now says Love Actually will be his last film about falling in love, actually.
It's a long time since I settled down now, and the romantic comedies are in a way the memory of falling completely in love for the first time and saying that's the one. And that's a long time ago now for me, so I might have to shift my ground and write about something else now.
Even if he does, there will still be millions worldwide who'll have a soft spot for the feel-good Curtis comedy canon. Rosie Millard, BBC News.
We'll be back a little later with the latest on the day's headlines, but now it's time to join our news teams across the UK. Bye for now.
Good evening from BBC London News. Hundreds of thousands of commuters suffered travel chaos today because of a strike by tube drivers over the sacking of a colleague. London Underground disciplined the worker after he was seen walking out of a squash club whilst on sick leave for an injured ankle. The RMT union says he was following doctor's orders and should be reinstated. This is the man that London Underground say they caught in the act. Chris Barrett, who is today on a picket line in protest of getting the sack, supported by his union colleagues.
The matter should have been at ACAS, that's where we should have been today, that's where we wanted to go, to the Conciliation Service to try and resolve the matter. But London Underground are refusing to go.
But why didn't you resolve it in a normal matter? Perhaps appeal to London Underground, perhaps go to Industrial Tribunal. There are lots of other ways instead of disrupting so much of the London Underground.
Well, going to Industrial Tribunal, even if the Industrial Tribunal awards in the favour of our member, there's no law to state that our member will have their job back.
If commuters thought they'd stomach today's disruption in the hope that it might all go away, there's disappointment ahead. The ballot result calling for strike action over tube safety is out next week. This is fast becoming a winter of discontent for tube travellers.
These people, they're hiding under the umbrella of the fact that they're trying to protect their union members, but all they're doing is holding everybody else to ransom.
They seem to strike just for any reason at all.
There are standard procedures outside the normal workplace. Of course, there's the tribunal process, which any employee may exercise at any time, whether the formal disciplinary process, company's process, has been applied or not, and clearly that is available to Mr. Barrett in this case.
Even commuters hoping to get away from all the misery over the festive season may find it difficult to escape from all the disputes. Gatwick Express drivers are to walk out over pay. Their employers want to increase their total salaries over 2 years linked to productivity to nearly £37,000. The unions want more. So when will tube and train users get the service they deserve and pay so much money for? Well, at this rate, not for a good while. The famous knowledge exam which black cab drivers need to pass could be scrapped. The Public Carriage Office is looking at allowing cabbies to use a new satellite navigation system. It's because there's been a steep fall in the number of people taking the exam. This exclusive report from Andrew Winstanley.
To pass the knowledge, these students must learn their way from A to B within a 12-mile radius of central London. And that's so difficult, probably 2/3 of them will fail or give up. That's why the powers that be have decided to modernise the course, using technology to cut down on what they have to learn. That could mean students like Ben Mann in the future concentrating their route knowledge on central London and using a satellite navigation system to help them on the city outskirts.
If you're going out far out of London, then obviously a little bit of direction wouldn't hurt. I agree with the sat-nav would be probably a great idea, but in central London, if a cabbie don't know where he's going, then he ain't a cabbie, really.
Private hire company Blueback is a good example of how this is already being used. All their 60 vehicles are now fully equipped.
OK,
The system is now telling me that I have a job. It's actually a job quite local. I'll accept that. And in a few seconds, the satellite will then send down all the information and tell me exactly where it is to about 2 or 3 metres.
Of course, satellite navigation does have its drawbacks, as it won't know about things like roadworks and diversions, so drivers still have to have a degree of knowledge. But the Public Carriage Office has a problem, because applications to do the knowledge were down this year by 50%. That means with London's rising population, in a few years, you might find it difficult hailing a ride. So it's likely the knowledge will be simplified with sat-nav systems to back it up, but it's still very unlikely to disappear. Andrew Winstanley, BBC London News.
The Stop the War Coalition and the Metropolitan Police are to meet on Monday to work out a suitable route for protesters who want to march during President Bush's visit to London next week. Talks between the two sides ended today with no resolution. Stop the War want permission to march past Parliament. Sport and in rugby union, Harlequins have lost to Leeds 13-6 in their 6th round cup tie. And now, here's Peter with a look at the weather forecast.
Thanks very much. Well, this evening's rather stormy weather will have blown itself out by tomorrow. A lot of sunshine to start the weekend, perhaps a shower turning up in Guildford late on in the day. On Sunday, a foggy start, but once again, once the fog gets out of the way, there'll be a good deal of sunshine around during the afternoon. And then next week, it looks as though it's going to be wet and windy again.
Now finally, we all know how our money doesn't go as far in the capital as elsewhere in the country when it comes to buying property. But would you be prepared to pay £145,000 for a 10-foot by 9-foot flat? Sarah Harris took some convincing.
Right, so here we are. This is it, number 6.
Courtfield Gardens.
And this is the
Living room, dining room,
bedroom.
kitchen. This is it. Would you like the grand tour?
I'm ready. So this basically is it, isn't it?
That is it.
How big is this flat?
10 foot by 9 foot 9.
What do I get for that?
Let me show you. Kitchen, 2-ring hob, sink, 2 cupboards, built-in fridge, and a striking view. So we've got a deep linen cupboard here, lots of space for your clothes, and Sarah, I can see you found the bed.
Well, I couldn't really miss it. I do feel it's the focal point of the room.
The flat might be small and the price might be £145,000, but because of its location, there's always going to be a huge demand for something like this.
So this is the only other room in the house we didn't know about?
Yes, this is the Pierre de Resistance.
Extra seating for guests?
Fabulous. Do you want to make an offer?
The look says it all really, doesn't it? Anyway, that's it from us for now. Now it's time to hand it back to Fiona. Good night.
And the main news tonight, Rupert Murdoch has said he could withdraw his support from Labour at the next election. The media baron says the jury is out on whether his newspapers will back the Conservatives instead. The Minister for Children, Margaret Hodge, has apologised to a victim of sexual abuse for describing him as extremely disturbed. And Prince Edward has spoken of his relief and joy as his wife and new baby are finally reunited. And just a reminder, you can see Jeff Randall's interview with Rupert Murdoch in full on Newsnight, which is getting underway now over on BBC Two. But from all of us on the 10 o'clock team, have a great weekend. Good night.
Sometimes strangers come into my home. Sometimes they don't even talk to me. Sometimes they don't even know how to care for me. But these people are paid to look after me.
Panorama goes undercover to reveal the truth about care at home. Sunday at 10:15 on BBC One.
Good evening. It's been a windy old day. Wales, though, bore the brunt of the stormy weather with gusts of wind in excess of 80 miles an hour, but I'm glad to say that it's all quietening down. Nevertheless, gusts of wind above 40 miles an hour, fairly unusual in eastern England, so it will be a bit blowy out on the roads here. But the rain is also easing too. You can really see it swirling around that area of low pressure today. And the rain was horizontal, I'm told, across Wales, and it poured for much of the day. But as I say, it's all moving out into the North Sea now, carried away by our low pressure. which will carry away the strongest winds too. It'll be a bit blustery, as I say, in eastern England, but where the winds ease, probably quite a chilly night compared with of late. Even a little bit of mist, say, in the Bristol area and the northeast of Scotland tomorrow morning. But probably most of the weather activity in Scotland during tomorrow, still the remnants of the rain in the north and the Northern Isles slowly petering out. And then plenty of showers, I think, coming in on that northwesterly wind, and even a little bit wintry on the hills, probably driest down in the south and east, Fife and the borders. Also quite a few showers will run down through the Cheshire Plains, as we often see with the northwesterly wind, possibly catching the Lancashire coastline as well, but either side quite fine probably. The best of the sunshine, I think, reserved for eastern parts of England tomorrow, and perhaps also the threat of a shower as the day wears on in the south, but I don't think spoiling the day. There'll be a peppering of showers for Northern Ireland too, but for most of us it'll be drier and brighter with more sunshine than today, and lighter winds more importantly, so even with temperatures down a couple of degrees on today, it'll probably feel quite pleasant out and about. Probably worth packing the umbrella if you're heading off to watch that Euro qualifier, that Euro playoff I should say, between Scotland and Holland in Glasgow. You can catch the coverage on 5 Live, and the coverage live on Match of the Day of the Welsh match, where it'll be a bitter -4 degrees. At least we won't have a biting wind. If you are heading off to Europe just for the weekend perhaps, Berlin is looking fine and dry by Sunday, but rather chilly. Expect some rain in Milan and Madrid. A far cry from that of Sydney. The all-important rugby match on Sunday morning. It actually could have record-breaking heat through the day, but that might culminate in a thunderstorm. Hopefully it will be cooler and drier by the match itself. It'll be a cool start, I think, here in the UK on Sunday. A little bit of morning fog taking a while to clear, and perhaps the odd shower in the south and east. But for most of us, it looks drier than Saturday. Pretty bright, temperatures of 9 to 11, not bad at all. But already we've got the next Atlantic system brewing up. That'll come in on Monday, and more wet and windy weather follows.
No one's bigger than the Force. For once, what I say goes. Rules are not there to be broken.
You could have got yourself killed!
Loopholes are not there to be abused.
I can't help it if people fall for coppers. It happens all the time.
Oh, does it now?
Advantage is not there to be taken.
You're the detective. You figure it out.
A brand new series of Merseybeat starts Monday at 9 on BBC One.
BBCI brings you a brand new Doctor Who series, Scream of the Shalka. Transport yourself to another dimension and meet the latest Doctor, played by Richard E. Grant, at www.bbc.co.uk/Doctor Who.
Shock, horror, the stars as you've never seen them before.
What I say?
Hamming it up, dressing down.
Bill.
Belting it out. It's the one place to be. Children in Need, next Friday at 7 on BBC One.
Thank you very much.
Tomorrow night on BBC One, A Proposition.
If I was to say to you, you could go anywhere you want in the whole wide world, where would you go?
I've raised 3 children. I've never been late for work once. Sort yourself out.
And with Parkinson, Judi Dench and Peter Kay. Tomorrow night, BBC One. Well, tonight, 3 boys fighting over one girl. She must be popular. Thing is, the parents get to choose a date for their daughter. Meet my folks at 11:25. First, strobe lighting on BBC One. What you expect on a Friday night, really.